give you a very brief overview of the strategic analysis and data collection that we engaged in over the last year and some of the key findings from that data analysis. Next slide, please. So as you can see, the scope of the project here was quite extensive. It involved 15 different sports for men and women. And the data that we received from this data collection phase was quite extensive and certainly helped to inform our work. Next slide, please. The data collection process involves stakeholders from across all three divisions, all three NCAA divisions, with over 15,000 people participating, in addition to commissioners, as well as coordinators and assigners. We had over 10,000 officials and over 4,200 head coaches participate. And so the input into the process was very thorough, very informed, and quite extensive. So now we'd like to go to the next slide and our poll, the next poll. Put up the next poll, please. So the next poll will be to get your input on what you think the most critical issues are facing collegiate officiating. And this is a multiple choice, so you can pick all that you think apply, and we'll give you about 15, 20 seconds to fill it out. Okay, so it seems relatively obvious that the majority of you think that the pipeline is the most critical issue, followed by fees and quality, and maybe sportsmanship are the top four. So as we look at the data and the analysis that we received, let's go to the next slide, please. When we asked stakeholders across all different constituent groups what they think are the most overriding concerns, there were two primary concerns, and this was consistent across all groups. One, the pipeline, which you certainly concurred with. Pipeline of officials was that there are not enough officials coming into the system. And then secondly, the availability of quality officials available to do our contests. Next slide, please. So then when we narrowed this question about critical issues facing officiating and asked the Division III officials what they thought, we had over 6,800 responses, and the officials selected from a list of a dozen issues, and the four that you see on your screen there were far and away the most frequently selected in the order that you see them. So clearly fees not keeping pace, assigning strongholds, poor sportsmanship and treatment of officials, and recruitment of new officials into officiating were the top four issues that they identified. Next slide, please. And so as we did what you see on this slide is a quick summary, overarching conclusions that came from our data collection and analysis. 5 different issues that were identified there. The first one, officiating exists in a complex environment. Officials and coordinators commonly work across conferences, divisions, and outside the NCAA structure. And then conferences and the NCAA office share responsibility for the health of officiating, but operate with clear and separate lines of authority that are delineated by regular season and national championships. And the second item, the data confirmed that there's an aging population, aging pipeline, and lack of officials. The third item is that centralized interdivisional intra-conference coordination and communication is limited to a few sports. There's very little collaboration across sports or regions. The next item, that there is a need to address the culture and environment of officiating, as we see that has lots to do with our sportsmanship. And the last item, a national approach focused primarily on systemic and cultural change is necessary If we don't go at this with a national approach and with a very systemic and intentional approach, the impact is going to be minimal. So we have a third poll for you, please. In your opinion, which of the 5 conclusions should be the highest priority as we look to elevate Division III officiating? Okay, there's great consistency among this group. The aging pipeline and quality issues seems to be your greatest concern as well. Thank you for sharing that. Now I'll turn it over to Sandy to talk with us a bit about our strategic planning process.
Thank you, Carolyn, and good afternoon, everyone. So the purpose of the strategic plan is really twofold. Number one is to address the cultural and systemic issues that were identified in the study. And secondly, to collaboratively engage stakeholders to address the issues or the future of officiating. So really, those are the core 2 purposes of the plan itself. What we want to do now is take you through the different components of the draft that's been prepared for the strategic plan, stopping to pause on each area to get your feedback. So Patrick will go to the next slide, please. So this is the vision statement that has been drafted. The goal is to have an aspirational statement that gives you an ideal vision of the future. So the key components are to elevate officiating as an integral part of the intercollegiate athletics experience, and to do that through an association-wide commitment that's broad-based, seeks diverse recruitment, and focuses on comprehensive education and retention strategies. So now what I'd like to do, we're going to put a poll up, and before we do that, let me give you a bit of instruction. So what we'd like you to do is respond to the poll. If you respond that this needs some work, we'd like for you to put into the chat any feedback that you might have. So go ahead, Carrie, let's put the poll up, please. So this vision statement, is it aspirational and describe an ideal future for Division III officiating? Strongly agree, agree, neither agree nor disagree, disagree, or strongly disagree. Excellent. All right, excellent. Thank you for your feedback. And please, if there's anything that you see that is missing or needs to be added, if you would dump that in the chat for us, we will be collecting everything that's put in the chat. It'll be provided to the Strategic Vision and Planning Committee that will look at how that would be integrated into this draft of the plan. Thank you for your feedback on that. Most everybody agrees or strongly agrees, so we appreciate that. Let's go to the next slide, please. So these are values. The values need to be identified to help drive the culture and guide decision-making as we go into the future of officiating. So these are the 4 values that have been selected: respect, diversity and inclusion, integrity and excellence. The statements that you see following those 4 words are a description of what the committee is thinking about how those values will drive the culture: fostering appreciation for the role of officiating, as well as positive sporting behavior, diversity and inclusion. This is about intentionally reflecting a diverse community. Integrity is about the environment that focuses on fairness, accountability, consistency, and accuracy. And then excellence is about communication, continuous improvement, and high quality performance. So with that same thing, we're going to take a poll here, see how you agree with these, and then ask for your feedback in chat should you wish to provide some. Let's go ahead with the poll, Carrie. So will these statements, these values and statements, drive the desired culture and guide decision-making for Division III officiating? We really appreciate your feedback on this. Is excellent. Awesome, thank you. So please take time and add it to the chat here, anything that you think will be helpful. So if you're not sure, maybe or no, please help us, help guide us with your feedback. I'll leave that up for just a second. All right, Patrick, let's go to the next one. This next slide shows you, these are what we are referring to as pillars or focus areas. So the strategic plan has been divided into 5 focus areas that for each focus area, we're going to show you the goals in just a moment. So this is a structural issue for the strategic plan itself. We've broken down into partnerships. Really, in order to address officiating, it must be done in collaboration with those outside of Division III as well. Recruitment to the NCAA Division III, general recruitment would fit in, or recruitment into the avocation itself fits under partnerships, just to give you an idea. Advancement pathway is everything that's boots on the ground with officiating itself. And then the culture and environment. And lastly is the administration of officiating. So that's the focus areas that have been designed. Carrie, let's go ahead and put the poll up to see if this makes sense to you. It might make more sense after you see the goals, but let's get you a first pass on this. All right, awesome. 82% yes. So we've got a little bit of work to do there. And as we go through, again, this might start to make a bit more sense as we go through it. But if you have any thoughts that led you to your decision, please put it in the chat for us. So we appreciate that. All right, now we're going to slide into the different pillar areas. You can advance to the next slide. What we're going to do is, before each of the pillar areas, I'm going to show you a couple of key data points that led us to those particular goals that we'll show you on the following slide. So Patrick, let's go ahead and advance then. So some key data issues with regard to why partnerships and what led to the goals in developing partnerships. 78% of Division III officials work at least some contests in Division I and II, obviously driving us towards collaboration with Divisions II and I. Secondly, is Division III officials work at least some contests at other officiating levels. You can see the numbers are there extraordinarily high. More than 50% work at both in youth, community, college, and high school levels. Next one. 55% of officials, Division III officials, receive assignments from a coordinator who assigns for more than 3 or more conferences. So they're working in at least 3 conferences in their sport. And of those, 64% of those officials agree that those assignments from that coordinator have a positive impact on their officiating career. Next slide, next point. So 91% of Division III head coaches agree that the in-game actions and reactions of coaches and players play an important role in creating positive sportsmanship and crowd behavior. All right, so let us show you then some of these key, there are lots of data points, but these are some of the key ones that led to now our goals under partnership. So there are 5 goal areas. So first and foremost is to foster partnerships across the divisions 1, 2, and 3, ensure that happens. Number 2 is to regionalize training and development of coordinators, as well as regionalizing assigning alliances. Again, where this makes sense and by sports. So lots of detail falls under this, but these are the big goal areas. Thirdly is to create a national educational officiating alliance. So that's for organizations like the National Federation of High Schools, NAIA, National Association of Junior Colleges, each of those entities that has an educational focus in officiating to create a national alliance of those organizations. Number 4 is to develop allies and partners to cultivate resources and financial support to help make the investments that are needed to move officiating forward. And lastly is to partner with coaches associations, officials associations, and national governing bodies to advance important issues around recruitment, retention, education, training, and evaluation of officials. So with that, we're going to go ahead and take a poll on 2 issues. We'd like to know more detail on number 1. Is your conference a part of an assigning alliance currently in any sport or an NCAA cross-divisional alliance? So again, in any sport, are you, please check off all that apply. Awesome, thank you. So 40% are in alliance, at least in any given sport. There's certainly cross-divisional alliances in sports that are happening, 31%. A few people are not sure what that reference is, which makes sense. Again, some clarity that we need to make sure we provide. And then 38% are not sure. Excellent. All right, thank you. One comment I did want to make before going to the next poll is because I heard through the partnerships there, showed you the content. We didn't get your feedback on, how does that work? You are going to receive a follow-up survey that allows you to provide detail on some of this stuff. So I just wanted to let you know that. And that's why we're pulling on particular issues we need your feedback on at this point in the development process. So we'll take questions about that later. So Carrie, let's go to the next question about coach engagement. So which of the following is the best way to engage coaches, would you think, or is the best way to engage coaches in the improvement of Division III officiating? Should we do that through coaches associations, through conference offices, through institutional administrators, or all of the above? Or maybe you have another idea. Awesome, thank you. So 65% all of the above, and then coaches associations is next. So excellent, thank you for your feedback. Patrick, let's go to the next slide then. So now we're going to focus on recruitment to the NCAA Division III. So 79% of Division III officials begin their officiating career at the high school and youth level. Go ahead and advance, Patrick, to the next one. Thank you. So what's happening at the high school and youth level? 2020 officially human data, which focused only on high schools. We learned that 50% of officials are over the age of 50. These are high school officials, and 45% of them are within 6 years of retirement. We learned in 2017 from the NASO data that focused, we looked at the youth only in the 15 sports that we were looking at. 13 of the 15 sports as they also had data on, and the average age currently of the youth officials in those 13 sports was 53 or in 2017. So then we have a question for you. Go ahead and hit next. So how long do you think it takes an NCAA official on average in any sport to go from starting in the profession to the NCAA? Awesome. All right, so the group selected 6 years or 8 years and then 4 years. So Patrick, let's go ahead and reveal the actual results. So the average, this is across all 15 sports that we studied. The average is 8 years from entering the avocation to entering the NCAA. So go ahead, Patrick. So what is the mean age of our current group of NCAA Division III officials? 48, almost 49 years old. Go ahead, Patrick, thank you. Currently, the demographics of this group, 80% of our Division III officials are Caucasian or white, and 85% are male. And as we were looking at what's the key factor that tells us what the lack of availability looks like? We learned that 12 Division III sports in the last full season had to reschedule a contest at least once because of a lack of available officials. So as you can see by this set of data, the need is high and the pipeline is not favoring the direction that we want to go. All right, Patrick, let's go ahead to the next one. Thank you. So what are the goals that have been designed for recruitment to Division III? One is a national recruiting campaign that would be activated on a regional basis with a strong focus on diversity. Implement sports-specific strategies. There are some sports that have demonstrated a much greater need than others. That's where the priority would start. With a focus to increase the quantity of qualified officials, to develop regional strategies to support coordinators' education and training with a particular focus on engaging the high school and youth level in those coordinators' education and training. Create pathways, direct pathways through relationships to and from high school and youth so that we foster that relationship that is already happening at the official level. And then lastly is mitigate barriers to entering NCAA Division III officiating. Certainly we've learned quite a bit about whether that's fees, travel, other types of things as well. So again, we're going to ask you for feedback on this at a later date, and happy to take questions at the end of the presentation. We'll go ahead and shift to some of the polling questions then that we have. So number one, what have you seen as the greatest barrier to recruiting Division III officials? Is this multiple choice, financial requirements for training, insufficient compensation, no clear path, competition from high schools, NAIA and youth, and other? Okay, very good. Pretty widespread across it all, which reflects the data that we've collected as well. Let's shift to the second polling question, please. So what have you seen as the greatest, okay, in your role, and please be very honest about this, in your role, how likely are you to help recruit officials into Division III? And again, this is within your role, not asking you to do anything outside your role, but to fully engage your role in every way possible to help recruit officials. All right, thank you for that. Just about evenly spread, and we appreciate, again, your honesty and feedback on that question. All right, let's shift then to the next advancement pathway. Gotta get this out of the way. So our first data point for you here, 49% of Division III officials hardly ever or never receive performance feedback from their coordinator. Female officials were 16% more likely to hardly ever or never receive feedback. 71% of Division III officials agree education and training is effective. And 48% of Division III officials cited required travel and attending multiple officiating camps and schools as barriers to entering or advancing in NCAA officiating. So let us show you now how we, what we have created for advancement pathway goals to help address some of those data points that we just shared. First and foremost is to define a position. What is the role of Division III officiating within the advancement pathway? We don't want it to be a place that people are, you know, going down to or up from, and what is the actual role and how does that, how do we articulate that? Number two, outlining and communicating the official's advancement pathway by sport. What does that look like, all the way from entering the avocation through maximizing your opportunities through the NCAA. Thirdly, strategically advance competitive, talented officials in a thoughtful way along the pathway so that we can mitigate the amount of time it takes for an official to get into the NCAA. Share best practices for comprehensive education, training, and development. Set standards and expectations for observation and evaluation. And lastly, there, mitigate retention barriers. So with that, Patrick will go ahead to our polling questions on advancement pathway. The first one, does your conference utilize coaches' evaluation of officials? Required, optional, depends on sport, no common practice, don't know. Thank you. The most frequently selected one is it's optional, and then depends on the sport. And then 20% are required, just under 20% are required. All right, thank you. Let's shift to the next polling question, please, about effectiveness. Do you feel coaches' evaluations are effective? So excellent. Thank you for the feedback. If the answer is maybe, we would love some feedback in chat there about when you have seen that effective or not effective. Thank you for your feedback. Let's shift to culture and environment. Quick check-in, is the pace that we're moving at working for people? Know if we can get feedback there in the chat or not, or Patrick or one of my colleagues, stop me, slow me down if you think it needs to be, the pace needs to be adjusted. Okay, culture and environment. So 30% of Division III officials describe sportsmanship and the treatment of officials as less than good. So 70% thought it was good. Division III officials and head coaches agree that the #1 way to improve the treatment of officials is through a greater appreciation for each other's role. Female and African American officials are more than twice as likely than Caucasian or male officials to experience or witness sexist or racist behavior or language. And lastly, more than 15% of Division III officials across 7 different sports did not agree that they feel physically and emotionally safe during contests or from the arrival at the facility to departure of the facility. Okay, Patrick, we're going to shift over. So the goals that have been designed for culture and environment, #1 is positioning and fishing as an integral part of the college athletic experience. It's a cultural shift that we'd be aiming for there. Fostering good sporting behavior, mutual appreciation, and a culture of inclusion. Sharing best practices for game day treatment. We did receive significant data and by sport that officials provide feedback about what you know, some of their greatest desires are in terms of their experience. Providing a tool for officials to evaluate their institutional experience. mitigating issues related to discrimination and lack of safety, and lastly, to encourage appreciation for officials and share best practices of sport cultures. So we'll go ahead. We have a number of questions, polling questions. We have 4 different polling questions for you on culture. First one, do your coaches understand the important role that they play in fostering a positive sporting environment? All right, great feedback. Thank you for that. Let's shift now to safe environment. How safe do you believe the game day experience feels to officials visiting your campus? Awesome. Thank you for your honesty on that question. Most are feeling safe. All right, let's shift to best practices. Does your conference currently provide a set of best practices for game day operations regarding the treatment of officials? Excellent. So 55% say yes. Excellent. We're going to be seeking you guys out to get your copies of those. Thank you for that feedback. Let's shift to our 4th and final question on culture, which is officials' feedback. Do officials in your conference have a defined avenue to provide feedback regarding their experience at contests? Awesome. So 37% were yes on that one. All right, thank you. Let's shift to our last pillar area, and then we'll open it up for questions. With regard to administration and what led to the goals in administration, again, lots of data. These are some key points to share with you. 33% of officials do not agree that the assigning process used by their coordinator or assigner is fair. 64% of officials agree receiving better assignments is associated with attending their coordinator or assigner's camp or school. 25% of D3 coordinators and assigners do not perform any evaluations. And 60% of Division III officials were less than satisfied with their compensation. Again, just some key points leading to these 6 goal areas for administration. 1 is centralizing leadership for NCAA Division III officiating. 2, developing a national registry for NCAA Division III officials and coordinators. Further reviewing officiating fees and fee structures, in particular doing that on a regional basis. 4, onboard, develop, create succession planning for conference coordinators and centralize national standards for conference coordinators. And lastly, provide exit interviews or exit surveys for officials leaving the avocation. So those are the 6 administration goal areas. And we'll shift to, we have 2 final polling questions for you, and we'll open it wide open for questions. So do you believe the officiating fees you currently pay are competitive with other conferences in your region? Awesome, 66% yes, and then 19% depends on the sport. Thank you. And then our last polling question for you is about coordinators and assigners. Do you believe your conference coordinators and assigners are well respected by their officials? So 53% said yes, and 28% depends on the sport. So excellent feedback, and we can shift over to our timeline. So this process started in August, and as you see, and we're doing with you today, we keep collecting data that informs and hones in to a well-informed strategic plan. That is going to be the stakeholder process will continue through the first part of January. And then we will have a final draft in the hands of the Division III Commissioners Association about that second week of February is the plan. So we'll go to the very last slide that opens us up for questions. Thank you. Patrick?
So if I could, thanks so much, Sandy. So this is a part of the session where we are able to unmute the participants in terms of our attendees, in terms of questions that they may want to ask directly. Any of the moderators can assist too if they got anything directly sent to them or to the Q&A. If you'd rather put your question in chat or the Q&A, you can do that as well. So if you have a question, use the raise your hand feature, and we'll call on you and allow you to talk and speak to the whole group. So please do. We're looking for as much feedback as possible. I can also go back to a slide if you'd like to. So Tony, I'm going to let you talk and ask your question. You will need to unmute though.
Can you hear me now?
We can now, Tony. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I do basketball, but I'm involved in other sports because I was a former commissioner and one time NCAA referee, worked Final Fours and things of that nature. So I've been very fortunate. But I think one thing in recruiting that needs to be looked at also that a lot of people miss is areas around the country. It does have a definite effect on how you attract officials based on location, where your schools are, part of the country you're at. Down here where I'm at in Texas, I got more than I can handle. I have probably the largest African-American female program in the country, over 100 African-American women, more than that men. But we have opportunities because of where we're at. So I think that's an area that needs to be focused on also around the country in all sports. I think it's very critical.
Thanks, Tony. Dr. Meyer, we're going to let you speak next. Hold on one second. You will need to, hold on a second. You will need to unmute. Dr. Meyer? You're on mute still. Sorry, we cannot hear you. Ed, if you're speaking, I don't think any of us can hear you right now.
So here, try that again.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yep.
Thank you very much. Was curious to know if there was a poll taken regarding what coordinators of officials are paid for their position. You know, from feedback to recruitment, a great many of them require camp fees to make their ends meet per se. You know, having worked with Tony for a great many years and well aware of the process, a critical component of this in terms of getting feedback and recruitment is knowing what these individuals who spend countless hours in these positions earn. I know that in the conference I'm currently working for, they get paid approximately $3,500 to do this basketball job. And I would venture to say if you were working at a fast food restaurant, you would probably make considerable amount more with the hours that you put in.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's go with Tom Burns, please. You will need to unmute, please.
I didn't actually have my hand up, but I will say,
Okay.
I had an interaction with one of the other commissioners today, and one of the points I made, going back to earlier in my career, was many officials worked multiple sports, and I think a lot of officials have gotten away from that because assigners are requiring them to focus on their sport year round. Working summer games, or basketball, you work summer games, you work camps, you work clinics and all those kind of things, and you can't do baseball anymore because you're so focused on basketball or whatever. And I'm not trying to pick on the sport, but I think some of the best officials I worked with in the previous century literally were officials that worked 2 and 3 sports because they knew how to handle a game. It wasn't necessarily that call, but it was managing a game, handling coaches in a variety of ways in a variety of sports. And I think we've gotten away from that.
Thanks, Tom. Jim, you please go right ahead.
Yes, good afternoon and thank you. So 2 thoughts here. One, the assigner today of a Division III group, and I can speak personally relative to football, but I'm sure this is applicable basketball, so on and so forth, is when I started 14 years ago, the primary job was literally assigning officials, putting, John Doe at this game and Bill Smith at this game. The job has evolved to the point where during the season, it is incredibly time consuming. The amount of time, effort, and expense assigners typically put in has exponentially increased. And to an earlier point that was made, I didn't catch the gentleman's name, but it was a doctor, someone. I don't think assigners today at the small college level are compensated nearly enough. If they're genuine people and really doing it for the right reasons, they're not compensated nearly enough. And again, the job today has evolved so much more than just putting, John Doe on this game or Mary Smith on this game. It's way different now. And the complexities of rules and the things like this that, you give up your time, all in the idea of trying to make your conference group better, improve officiating. I mean, all those things are laudable, but at the end of the day, they're not recognized, quite frankly. And secondly, relative to assigners, if you were to do a poll, I think this should be a great question. How many assigners in collegiate sports are actually educators? The number would be very, very, very low. And by and large, officiating as an industry, it's like anything else. You've got to teach people. I don't like the word training. I think you train animals, but you've got to teach people. And this is clearly missing in officiating throughout the country at all levels. I mean, and it's really a problem in high school, quite frankly. If you go to a high school meeting where some interpreter actually is teaching something, I mean, that's almost miraculous. And it's not that much better at the small college level, and even sometimes, quite frankly, at the higher levels in college. But ultimately, I think assigners have to be educators/teachers, because you're teaching people how to do things. Right, wrong, don't do this, do this. And the quote Abraham Lincoln will often said, I've learned something from every person I've ever met, but most of what I've learned is what not to do. I've learned a great deal about officiating, what not to do. And I don't think there's an emphasis on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Arthur, please unmute.
Good. Can you hear me?
I can, or we can.
Outstanding. All right. Yeah, I'm a conference assigner for several conferences. I got a couple Division I, Division II, and Division III plus independents, mainly in the field of softball. And what the last gentleman just said, the teaching is fundamental. And unfortunately, I found out over the years that sometimes officials get lazy. And that's why we, as coordinators, like them to come to camps and clinics to get their head back into the college game and out of the summer ball game, so to speak. So it may be inconvenient for me, but those people that come and show you that they're willing to take the extra steps, and yes, you may give them some more opportunities. They can demonstrate that, hey, I can move you up now to a D2 game. You look, you've accomplished what I was looking for, and You came back this year and demonstrated what we taught you last year. These are all very important things to do. A lot of people just think they don't have to go, that once they get into the college, that, you know, they're commonplace and they won't take the steps to, I want to say, motivate themselves. And that's what, you know, it seems to be part of the problem. But, you know, that being said, fees and scheduling are a twofold thing. Everybody talks about not having enough officials. The problem is with an outdoor sport is when you have a weather delay or a rain out, everybody seems to want to reschedule on the same day. That's impossible. There's just not enough officials there. I've actually had to put out an email to all my conferences and say, do not reschedule for this date. There is no room at the end. So, you know, that's something you got to take into consideration for the outdoor sports is the rescheduling. The initial scheduling, hey, come February 1st, I got the best schedule in the world. After that, all hell breaks out. So, but, you know, but you got to consider those things. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Arthur. Tony would like to talk again. Go right ahead. You will have to unmute again. Tony?
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate what everyone said, but keep in mind that Division III is a constant recruiting battle. You're constantly working high schools at every location that you can figure out where to find them and coach them and train them, because you're dealing against Division II and Division I, and they're focusing on the best for their folks because the money's greater, the brightness is better, the recognition's better, and so you're lucky if you can keep 50% a group of officials constant in Division III. So it's a constant recruiting effort, a coaching effort, and a training effort. And be very frank with you, the NCAA has done a good job or a better job in all sports, I think, but especially basketball with their arbiter program and different programs they have in coaching and training. I think the Synergy program and all the video programs, we're using RefQuest this year, which I paid for the officials to see plays and things. So I think more of us are doing, all sports are doing better training, better coaching, and et cetera. But I think, again, the number one thing is constant recruiting, constant training, because you're competing against, you know, I mean, let me say this to you. Because of the program I have all the JUCOs, all the NAIs, all the Division IIIs, and the Division IIs. So therefore, I'm very fortunate that we can attract officials because of the many opportunities. But you got high schools that are paying more money and more mileage that you're competing against also, as you mentioned earlier. But again, when you're dealing with the NCAA, you got to remember, we're dealing with Division II and Division I.
Thanks, Tony. We are about just 5 more minutes left in the presentation. I don't know, Sandy, Carolyn, if there's any last minute recaps or anything else you want to say before we end today's session, but I think you said that we're sending out a survey afterwards. If there are other questions, obviously you can send an email to any of the commissioners that are on the panel. You can send it to the picture group as well. They had that information up on the last slide before I took everything down. And or go to your conference commissioner, who will then relay that to us. But Sandy, are there any other last things you'd like to say to the group other than that? Thanks for joining us today.
Certainly, thank you so much for your time and energy, your focus. Please keep that coming. As Patrick said, many ways to connect with us. You will receive a link to a Survey Monkey, which will break down this strategic plan that we've seen in detail. So if you want to, you can provide us more detailed feedback. Well, we would love whatever input you have to help inform this process. So thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. Lori, we're going to turn it back to you as president to wrap us up, and please go ahead.
Thanks, Patrick. And I remembered to unmute, which is my success story for the day. I'd like to thank the DIIICA for inviting NADIICA to partner in this project. It's been a great process, and I think we've all learned a lot. I'd like to really thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Your dedication to our profession and our student athletes has been noteworthy, especially this year. And it's been a long, interesting year. I hope you all get a chance over the holiday season to relax and find your peace. Thanks again for being with us today. Have a good one.
Take care, everybody. Happy holidays.